3, 2, 1. All right, what's the date today? The 17th?
Yes, 17th.
Welcome to the Board of Mayor and Alderman's Alderman meeting, May the 17th. Tonight we're here to speak about the city administrator. This is our second meeting about this specific issue. Tonight we're going to try to do this a little bit different. Last session we asked a lot of questions along the way. One of the folks that asked those questions is not here tonight, so that should help us a little bit. But I'm going to ask that the board sit through Mr. Jekyll from University of Tennessee Municipal Technical Advisory Service gives us the presentation. I'm going to ask that Paul, our cameraman, focuses on Mr. Jekyll, focuses on the PowerPoint slideshow, and then as we get towards the end, we'll decide how we're going to handle questions. Is that okay? Mr. Jekyll, the floor is yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me back. As always, I'm glad to spend some time with you all. As a reminder, I know I mentioned to you the last time. I work with the Municipal Technical Advisory Service at the University of Tennessee, and have been doing that for 16 and a half years now. Prior to that, I actually served in a city manager's office and as a city administrator for 14 years. I say that because I'm going to visit about that later on this evening and talk to you about some of my personal experiences about what a city administrator has to offer any organization, any community, based on my experience. This evening, we're going to talk about what City of Hendersonville has in terms of options with your charter for city administrator, because your charter does allow and is written to have a city administrator to be a part of the operations of the organization. A couple things I want to kind of revisit and touch on a few things. In Tennessee, so that some of you may recall, if you've been in some of my classes, in Tennessee there are actually a total of 345 cities, all total. Of those, there are 212 private act charter type cities. Okay. The rest obviously are what we call general law charters. So that you know, and I like numbers, kind of occupational hazard. In terms of numbers, the cities that have private act charters in Tennessee, 54 of them have either a city manager or city administrator, while the public act charter cities there are 58 cities that have either a city manager or city administrator in them. And I'm not going to talk this evening about private act charters except to let you know that to the extent that they exist. The only downside is you all can't take advantage of a private act charter. Since 1953, the state of Tennessee has said there will be no more private act charters. So you have a general law charter, which is a group of charters that are found in the state statutes. And there are several that are in the state statutes. Primarily, there are three basic types. That is the city manager commission charter, which some of you are familiar with. The city of Hendersonville used to have this particular charter years ago. There is also a modified council manager charter. And then there is the mayor aldermanic charter. The number 67 represents the number of cities that have this particular charter. I say that because when we talk about what's in a charter and who that affects, I want you to understand that changing charters involves making changes for 67 other cities in the state of Tennessee. So it becomes difficult to make changes to a general law charter, because not only do you have to have the state of Tennessee, the legislature, and the governor sign off, generally speaking, you have to have a significant majority of the cities agree to that kind of any kind of a charter change. So that with your particular charter, the language that we find in the charter is exactly the same for every single one of those 67 cities. We also, in our world, we also have to deal with the general laws that apply to operating cities, like purchasing laws, budget laws, zoning and planning. All of those things apply to us above and beyond just the charter provisions in the state laws. So, as a side note, in Tennessee, city management, city administrators, of the cities in Tennessee with populations over 10,000, there are actually only a total of 56 cities, of which Hendersonville obviously is one of. Out of 345, there are only 56 that are over 10,000 people. Of that number, there are 40 city managers or city administrators working full-time in managing those cities. Of the largest cities, the largest 56 cities, that represents 71% of those communities have either a city administrator or a city manager. Now, I will say this to you. Some of those cities are general law charters. Some of them are private act charters. But they are the largest cities in the state of Tennessee. So what's the difference between a city manager and a city administrator? And I know that's a little more difficult to read on this, but the city charter describes the duties of a city manager or a city administrator differently because of the types of charters that we deal with in Tennessee. So that when we look at two cities, the language in the charters can be different from one to the next. And I give my example is, and I want, the reason I'll point this out is I use them as an example later. How the city of Franklin is set up. While they have a city administrator, they have a private act charter. Their language is a little different than what the city of Hendersonville has, because the city of Hendersonville is constrained by the general law mayor-aldermanic charter. And so there's very little wiggle room for the city of Hendersonville in terms of language. Generally speaking, that a city administrator is a business manager whose duties are generally defined by the board and of mayor and alderman. Under the city administrator form of government, and we chatted about this before, and it's very specific to the general law charter in that the mayor retains the duties of the CEO for the city and can and would oversee to some degree the work of the city administrator. In contrast, when you look at a general law mayor or manager commission charter, the city manager is largely the CEO in that particular form of government. And so that the mayor's role usually shifts into one that is more of a ceremonial and responsible for running board meetings, and along with some other responsibilities that by state law any mayor will have. Talk a little bit about, and I know there have been a lot of questions in Hendersonville about referendums and whether or not we should or could do referendums to determine whether or not we all should have a city administrator or not. Local referendum, as you may recall, is very limited in its application and uses by the state of Tennessee. And we have had the state Supreme Court as well as the Attorney General hand down opinions that basically have reinforced that viewpoint, that we're only allowed to utilize referendum in those situations that the state of Tennessee says that we can. And it's a very specific list of what those things are. The first one is the general obligation bonds. If someone were to challenge a GO bond issue, it is possible to require a referendum on that. The other, and the one that we've seen more frequently lately, has to do with retail liquor sales, either package stores or on-premise consumption, and here lately, wine and grocery stores. Also falls under this particular part of the state law. Annexation now is still one of the areas that we would be required to have referendums. Having local option sales tax, or if you're going to increase the local option sales tax, you have to have a referendum in order to do that. This one, for some of you, may be more familiar. If you're going to adopt or surrender a general law charter, and we mentioned a few of them here, that has to be done by referendum, which is, I know exactly what happened back in the '86. And then a private act that is passed by the General Assembly is something that you can have a referendum on. An example that's more relevant and you can relate to is if someone were to have a hotel-motel tax. It is possible that you could be required to have a referendum to approve a hotel-motel tax or expansion of a hotel tax. A few other things real quickly. Creating emergency 911 districts, again, is one of those areas that we can have referendums. Recalling a city official if a charter permits for that. By the way, Hendersonville's charter does not. Adopting or amending home rule charters have to be done by referendums. And popular election of mayors, if you're going to have, and it basically is, if you're changing to a popular election in cities that are under the manager commission charter. For those who don't know, previously under manager commission charters, the mayor was basically appointed by fellow commissioners. You picked one of your fellow commissioners to be the mayor. Now there is an opportunity for those communities to actually popularly elect a mayor if they go through a referendum process. Consolidating city or county government, i.e. metro government. Again, the next one applies to increasing the number of commissioners in a city manager commission form of government from 5 to 7. That also has to be done by referendum. We don't see this too often, this one, having retail liquor licenses approved for manufacturers. So those are, let me back up. So those are really the only things that any city, and it's whether it's Hendersonville or Gallatin, Nashville, these are the only things that a city is allowed to, by the state of Tennessee, to have a referendum on. And they don't allow for wiggle room. They will not allow you to spend public money for referendums on any other issue besides those, I think, 13 that were a part of that list. Currently, the way, and I borrowed this from our elected officials class, if this looks familiar to some of you, the way that the city of Hendersonville operates currently with the mayor-aldermanic charter is what we would call the strong mayor form of government, where not only is the mayor on the board making policy decisions, but he or she is also responsible for implementation of all of those things and running the day-to-day operation and all that entails for running an organization on a day-to-day basis. What your charter allows for, and which is the thing that we're talking about, is to take advantage of the piece of that charter that allows you to have a city administrator who becomes responsible for running the day-to-day business of the city, becomes the chief operations officer, if you will, or chief administrative officer, however you like to view that. Their job is to do much of the day-to-day business of running the city and working with the department heads, and in essence being the liaison, if you will, between the board and staff in terms of how we get things done in a city and figuring out how we're going to get policy direction done, how are we going to move to implementation. So specifically, we'll look a few minutes at what the city of Hendersonville's charter has to say under 6-3-106. We have the duties of the mayor, and it's actually broken down into two very distinct sections. Section A is the first part, and it's the place where we talk about the mayor being the chief executive officer and all that would entail. It also says that the mayor is responsible for communicating information needed and recommended that the mayor deems expedient to the council. And then we talk about, the mayor has the ability to make temporary appointments of any officer or department heads, obviously except that of aldermen. And then and then the rest of that section talks about, what the board can do, the fact that the mayor can call special meetings, and if we're going to have a special meeting, there are some rules about that we have to tell people what we're going to have a special meeting about, and if there's going to be action, that the actions taken is limited to what we've said the meeting was about. That is actually in your charter. It is actually a part of what we consider open meetings laws of the state of Tennessee. The mayor will always be responsible, and I point out to you that the word shall. He or she shall countersign checks and sign all contracts. Mayor can make motions and have a vote on all matters coming before the board. You all know that. The mayor makes appointments to various boards and commissions. Much of that is also contained in state statutes, by the way. Appointments such as Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, and a few other commissions that are outlined in the state statutes. Those are all things that, regardless of whether or not someone had a city administrator, those are all things that the mayor has to continue to do as a part of their job responsibility. Above and beyond anything else that they may or may not do, they have to do those things. And nobody can take any part of that away. The second part of that, what the mayor's responsibilities are under Section B, which starts off this way. That unless some action is taken by the board by ordinance, not resolution, but by ordinance, to do something different or designate department heads to perform certain duties, the mayor would do these things as well. The first thing we talk about is Section 64101, which is a reference to the section that talks about city administrators. Unless you all appoint a city administrator, the mayor has that responsibility as well. And it goes on to discuss about employing people who work for the city, department heads, and the various disciplinary actions that go along with that. A couple of things I'll point out to you in this section. We talk about these actions have to be done by at least under personnel policies and procedures, if you have them, and I'm sure you do. The last part of this is the mayor can act as the purchasing agent for the purchase of all materials, equipment, supplies. They're responsible for preparing and submitting the annual budget and any other duties that might be assigned or required by the city council, by the board. So, you remember I talked about the city administrator has been a part of your charter since 1991. One of the things that occurred in 1991 is that the state of Tennessee modified the charter and included this next section for city administrator, among other things. It was not just this, but there were actually a number of changes that took place. One of those changes had to do with this next section, 64101, and the delineation of what a city administrator is responsible for or could be responsible for as of 1991. So that the board may appoint a city administrator, and that individual is under the control and the direction of the board, and the city administrator shall report and be responsible to the board. The board, by ordinance, may require the city administrator to perform any of the following things. The first is to administer the business of the municipality. Hence my reference to being a business manager, chief operating officer. This is where that comes from. Administrator should make recommendations to the board for improving quality and quantity of public services to be rendered by the officers and employees to the people in the municipality. And they need to keep the board fully advised of the conditions and needs of the municipality. We go on to mention there are a total of 7 things. We go on to talk about, the condition of having to report to the board about the condition of all the property, whether it's real or personal, and talk about and keep you all informed of what needs to be done in terms of maintenance and repairs or replacements. Needs to recommend to the board and suggest the priority of programs or projects. Needs to recommend specific personnel positions that might be required for the needs and the operation of the municipality, and I'm going to cut that short, but then perform such other duties as may from time to time be designated or required by the board. One of the things that you might notice, in several of these numbered items, we talk about recommended. Okay? The reason I bring that up is to tell you that they're not responsible for taking action. They're not responsible for doing things, making decisions. Their responsibility is to make recommendations to the board about what needs to be done in these situations, these categories. So in a situation where we have a city manager or an administrator, it winds up being the same. There is a role for mayors and council members or aldermen. And in particular, and I focused, and this was part of a larger paper, but I focused on those sections that talked about, to some degree, city administrators. The mayor and the council will continue to play active roles in running a local government in a situation where you have a city administrator. Because the city administrator has only as much authority or ability to do things as you, the board, allow that individual to do. And by statute, there are some things that they can only recommend to you all. So that you have the ability to continue to play a very active role in running the local government business. It's not a way to get out of or stop being responsible for running the business of the city. The administrator is someone who should be looked upon as the business manager working with you all to see that policies are being implemented. That's one of the key components to having a city administrator. They have to be a team member with you all. They have to recognize what you want to get done and figure out how to help get it done. That's part of their job. Whether or not we have an administrator or a city manager, you all still remain in control of what happens with the city. That's your job. You make the policy. Always. That's what you are elected to do. and no form of government takes that away. So you still are responsible for making policy and overseeing the performance on a daily basis, I might add, of a city manager, or in this case, a city administrator. City administrator is responsible to you all. Couple new wrinkles for you. I've given you all this evening two pieces of paper, or well, two things. One is actually the job description for the City of Franklin's city administrator. I think it's instructive for you and helpful for you to look at that document, and I'm not going to go through all of it. There are some things that I have highlighted as a part of this that, in my personal experience and I guess my personal opinion, are things that are important for you to see and know about what it is a city administrator can be capable of and should be expected to do in a situation where that person is going to run and be responsible for managing the day-to-day operation as the chief operating officer. There are some very good things in here as a job description goes, and I think you want to take a close look at those places where I've highlighted. The other piece of information I gave you is actually a document that the ICMA puts together talking about the benefits of having a professional manager to any organization. And there are plenty of them. Again, it's ICMA is the International City Managers and County Managers Association. They operate on a national level and have for quite some time. They know and they have individuals who've been involved in local city government for a long time. And so they have put that document together to help communities like ours understand the potential benefits of having someone professionally trained and professionally experienced, if you will, at running a city, of managing a city. Personal experience. Since some of you may know, I've been a city administrator for a number of years. I've worked in city manager's office for a few more besides. One of the things, a couple of things that I want you to understand and I want you to walk away with, a city administrator is an individual and should be an individual that helps the organization as a whole, but in large part helps to promote more of a team effort amongst staff and hopefully with the board as well. That ultimately the city administrator should help foster this idea of we all have to work together as a team to accomplish what we need to do with the limited resources that we have available to us, and what the priorities need to be and how we can get things done. And from my own experience, I know that that's a role that a competent city administrator can accomplish. I think they wind up also being someone who's very good at, and should be very good at, taking the direction that you all want as a board and working together with the department heads and the staff, figure out how to implement what it is you want to do. efficiently and effectively, and without costing us as much money as, or not nearly as much money as it could take if left to our own devices. The city administrator should be someone who has the ability, has the training, that knows most every facet of how a city operates. From my own experience, I can tell you, I can sit and talk to, after 30 some odd years, I can talk to any police chief, any fire chief, public works director, and I know exactly what they're talking about. And if I think they're trying to pull one over on me, I'll call them on it. Can call them on it. Because I know, because I've done this job for a lot of years, I have the training and the ability and the knowledge and the experience of doing this. That's the kind of person that you want, that we should have running an operation the size of the city of Hendersonville. I've done my tenure as a first-time administrator. One of the things I will tell you is it would always take a special personality to be someone who steps into a role as a first-time administrator. It is because you're talking about helping everyone, not just the board, but staff, department heads, and in the community in general, to make a transition that for some would be a significant transition. There's no mistaking it. And I don't care the size of the community, the degree of difficulty making the transition for some is pretty difficult. It's pretty high. But there are people in my business who have that kind of personality, who have that willingness to do that, and the training to do it. But I know that at the end of the day, it's a process that can be very successful. I work with a number of cities already that have city administrators and have had them for several years, who are also general law manager or mayor aldermanic charters as yourselves, as this community is. And I have seen the success that they have enjoyed. And I know that it's with the right person working together with the board, the city administrator can do some very good things for the organization and the community. One of the things, and I know I mentioned it to you before, and I gave you, this job description, and we talked last time about ordinances. One of the things that I mentioned to you is whomever if you make the choice, I would look closely at what the qualifications are or need to be for this individual. I have some personal biases in that regard. I think someone, if you're going to run a city business, generally speaking, they should have a master's in public administration, because we get the training to run an organization in a government setting, and it's different. There are different rules, there are different applications, there are different criteria for running an organization in a political environment as opposed to a private sector. Somebody with a master's in public administration has had that training extensively, and you should look for someone who's got the experience, a number of years of experience in this business. And I do call it a business because that's what it is. The third and last thing is And I think if we get to the point of doing a job description, the last part of that is it should be a requirement that this person be a member of the ICMA organization, without question. And I say that because of what's up on the screen right now. The ICMA has a code of ethics that they are very good at enforcing. They keep track of it. We keep track of ourselves. And if we know of someone who is violating that code of ethics, I have colleagues in this state will have absolutely no heartburn or even a qualm about reporting someone for violating a code of ethics. And they have several things, and there are actually 12 altogether. The first one has to do with being dedicated to the idea of effective and democratic local government by responsible elected officials. And the second part of that is that professional management is essential to achieve the objective of effective and democratic government. The second part is we want to affirm that there is a dignity and a worth to the services that we provide as local government. And we should have a sense of social responsibility as individuals, as a public servant to our communities. We need to be responsible and dedicated to the highest ideals of honor and integrity in all of our public and personal relationships. Number 4 is what I think is probably one of the more critical, that we have to, as members of this organization, we have to recognize that the function of local government at all times is to serve the best interests of all the people. Well, five I should have, that was something else. Let me jump, I forget what 5 was, but I'll jump to 6. Our job is to submit policy proposals, ideas, recommendations to the elected officials, provide you all with facts and advice on matters of policy so that you can make better decisions, set community goals. It is also our job as professional managers and administrators that we recognize that elected representatives, are entitled to the credit for establishing local government policies. The responsibility for execution rests with those who are administrators and managers. Now remember, these are all part of our ethics. We're held to these ethics. Keep the community informed on local government affairs and encourage communication between citizens and all local government officers. Emphasizing friendly and courteous service to the public and improve the quality and image of the public service. The 12th one, and I include the 12th one because of all of the 12, frankly, I think it's probably the most important one. It probably should have been first. Public office is a public trust, and a member shall not leverage his or her position for personal gain or benefit. And in my career, I have seen people who subscribe to this code of ethics who have found themselves without a career for violating that last tenant. I've personally known people who have lost their careers for violating that. When I tell you that our organization, the people who do what we do, take this serious, we do. And we will always take that seriously, and it's one of the reasons that I strongly encourage that as a job requirement, along with educational training, along with experience, that individuals must be a part of this ICMA organization as a requirement for being a manager or a city administrator, period. Questions? Yes, sir. Mr. Brown.
Let me get your mic on.
My first question is just a personal question. As a city administrator, is most of them's demeanor like you, Gary? You're one of the most level people I know. And that's a compliment.
Thank you. The answer
Have
to
you ever got flared up?
honestly,
Yeah,
one time
one time.
in 30 years, 30 plus years, one time. And that was only to yell at somebody. One time.
I have to say I admire you. That's good.
To answer the first part of your question, though,
Yeah.
yes, actually, most people in my business who do what I do or have done are a lot like me.
I'd say that's good. If
Well,
you have to deal with us.
It helps because it does. I will tell you, it does take a certain personality type to be able to do this work. This work is not for everybody. Trust me, I know. I've seen some folks who have failed. It has not been a good fit as a career choice. But for those who have experience, who have actually been in this business, one of the traits that you'll see from them are what you see in me now.
That's the whole point. If and when, if ever,
Yes.
this board chooses to, I'll say, go the city administrator route, there's not a one of us up here that, I mean, I did some hiring and firing, but I've never hired a city administrator. And from the way I understand it, city administrator is hired by the board,
Yes.
works and reports basically to the board. The mayor is part of that board. Will you or somebody with your capabilities and knowledge hold our hand through that entire process?
Yes, we can. As a matter of fact, I would tell you that I have done that several times for city administrators and city managers. I've also done it for other department head level positions too.
Right.
But no, I would definitely help you all, and I actually have a process, truthfully, that I like to utilize that as a part of that, and I know I'm kind of weaving off a course, that involves discussions with all of you all as board members about what it is that you want in someone. If you were going to have a city administrator, what does that person look like to you? What's important for them to be able to do? And have some conversations with you to help us build basically a job profile that helps us look at individual resumes. But at the end of the day, yeah, we can do that, and we would.
I have one more piece to my, I have another question to my piece here. And I wrote, this may be worded wrong, I just wrote down what are the failure areas? And that's not communicating with you very well what I want. And you said it a while ago, as a first-time city going through this, okay, we're a city of 56, 7,000, we've grown tremendously the past 20 years, tremendously the past 10 years. We, as any government, growing from 30,000 to 55, 60,000 people and not having an Indian Lake Boulevard or anything like that, and boom, 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 and you've lived here, so you know.
Yeah.
If we consider this, what is the failures that we might look for? If that's a fair, I don't even know if that's a fair question, but
In terms
in your
of
experience, what have you seen around that are bad roadblocks?
Well, I think part of that has to do with communication, and an ability to determine that you need to work together, and to be less. And this goes for everybody, board members as much as department heads and staff, to be less territorial, if you will, and less interested in protecting turf. And if the goal is to improve what we do, how we do it, you can overcome a lot of that stuff. But that would be the potential, the biggest potential are those things. Lack of communication, territorial protection, or turf, protecting my turf type stuff. It's hard to fight that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Next in the queue, we've got Alderman Waters.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Gary. That was a nice presentation.
Thank you.
But I like the word you said close to the end of your remarks, if we decide to go that direction. I appreciate you saying that. This will probably come before this board eventually. I don't know whether it will or not, and I won't spend a lot of time debating it tonight, but I do have a question. Could you go back to the slide under what is the difference between a city manager and a city administrator?
I think so. I think that was at the beginning, wasn't it, Alderman? And I apologize,
That's all right, we got all night.
yes, sir.
When was and why was the second part changed from April the 26th when we met and you gave your presentation? And I'll read it if you want me to.
I think I already know.
Let me read it.
Yeah?
Generally speaking, a city administrator is a mayoral assistant whose duties are defined by the mayor and board.
I made that change.
By whose authority?
Mine, since it's my presentation.
But you're not saying what you told us in April. Why did you change it, if I may ask?
Because I felt that describing it as a business manager was more appropriate, because a mayoral assistant sounds more like a secretary,
No.
and that was not my intent. And because my intent was that the person should be viewed as a manager, as a business manager for the organization.
So he's going to be a business manager, not administrator then, according to that.
Mayoral assistant was actually what the word was.
That's right.
I know.
And I ask you why.
I wrote it. So I knew when I looked at it in preparation for this evening that the context of a mayoral assistant would not be appropriate because that's not what this person is.
Gary, I understand what you're saying.
And that's
but
why I made the change.
Do you understand my position?
No,
You don't?
no,
Well, I'm sorry.
me too.
But when you say a mayoral assistant,
Yeah.
that covers a lot of territory than a business manager.
Well, no, it actually, I think a business manager is more appropriate and covers more territory because that individual is responsible for the day-to-day operational management of the city, as in the chief administrative officer or chief operating officer of an organization, which is much closer to what a city administrator does in our profession.
I thank you.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sure we'll debate this at the proper time. Thank you.
Alderman Stamper, you're next in the queue.
Gary, you mentioned 56 cities greater than 10,000.
Yes.
40 have city administrator or city manager.
Yes, sir.
Do you know how many of those roughly have the mayor aldermanic charter or something similar with a strong mayor type of government if they're under a private act? Do you know roughly, or I can email you and remind you of this question if you don't know off the top of your head?
Let's see, general law charters. I try to come prepared where I can. General law charters with mayor aldermanic charters that have city administrators, okay?
Yeah, I was looking at that slide with the 56.
I know.
Oh, that's where I got the note.
And I'm gonna give you a couple. I don't know if I brought that particular piece with me. Let me give you a couple cities, okay? Spring Hill, Laverne, Farragut, McMinnville, White House. Home rule charters, Sevierville. Private act charters with city administrators. And I just looked at city administrators, okay? Franklin, Collierville, Germantown, Morristown, Tullahoma, Greenville, Dixon. Now, that's only, what's that, 3, 6, 7, so that's 13 of those. So the rest of the 41,
The 27, 28 cities are
yeah,
under mayor aldermanic.
are, no, those are city managers. The 41 would be city managers. Remember I said that 41 of them have either, well, let me back up.
You said 56 cities have 10,000 or more.
Yes,
And what I'm trying to figure out in my head is how many of those that have city managers or administrators either have our form of government or the equivalent of a full-time mayor, or with the same responsibilities that our mayor would have. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
that have the same charter.
Either have the same charter or, like I said, if they're private act, they also have somebody that's non-ceremonial in the mayor's slot.
I don't have that number. The cities that I gave you are in fact the cities that have, the first group was the cities that have your same charter with city administrators, okay? The second group of cities that I gave you, starting with Franklin, that group in there, those are private act charter cities that have city administrators. The only piece that I can't tell you at this point is how many of those
Yeah,
have
that.
full-time mayors, part-time mayors.
Yeah.
That's the only part of that I don't know.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Alderman Cunningham.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for coming out again tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a few questions for clarification. From what I understand, how you presented it, the mayor still remains as the CEO and is more in charge of strategic type of planning, decision-making, making recommendations to the board for more policy-making. Is that correct?
At a minimum, yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. I mean, that's a very broad spectrum.
Well,
And
and there's more to that. I mean, and I think we chatted about this some at our last meeting as well. Because of where Hendersonville is, locationally, there are external organizations, there are external things going on that the city of Hendersonville should and must have a presence, because we're one of the biggest outside of Nashville and Franklin. We're one of the biggest communities in the metro Nashville area. We should have a presence.
Right.
And Mr. Mayor Foster knows, because we talk about it all, several of us talk about it all the time, there's an alphabet soup of organizations that the city of Hendersonville needs to be involved with, because there are opportunities inherent with that.
Right, and we want our piece of the pie.
There you go.
You said it.
Okay. And then just so that I'm trying to get a clearer description, and like I said, the mayor still acts as the CEO, and then the city administrator would be more like a COO, where that person would be more, I'm not going to say he, because it could be a she.
Yes, yes.
More in a tactical role of implementation of operations to make sure everything is running smoothly, to make sure that each department is getting what they need, and is liaison with the department heads, and that sort, like more of the day-to-day type of operations. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I got that clear now. The only other thing that I'm not real clear on is who reports to who. Does this person, he or she, report to 13 different people? Or is that person dotted line to the mayor and then to the board? And I'm still not clear about how that works.
And therein lies part of the issues with transition. This individual ultimately is responsible to the 13 of you all. That's how it's set up.
Is it like for major things reporting to us, and then day-to-day things to the mayor?
It can be.
Because I can't.
There are some things.
I can't envision if I had a job.
Right.
I mean, I have a job, but if I had that job, that I would have to report, make sure that all 13 people on the board were satisfied with my performance and what I did and how I talked to this department head and didn't show favoritism to that person, I can't envision that would pretty much, I mean, you kind of have to focus on one person.
No, actually.
How do they handle that? I mean,
They got to make sure they've always got 7 votes.
Well,
I mean, that's simple.
yeah. Do you remember in the
but that person is more tactical. They're not looking for the mayor is more of the strategic person.
I'll relate a conversation that I had with a city manager of a larger city, okay? When I asked him about how the relationship works between himself and what he does and his mayor, because in that situation, the mayor is more involved, more day-to-day at City Hall. And his response to me was that even for the city manager position, what they've come up with is that the mayor, in many instances, in their case, winds up being a sounding board for him, the city manager, about direction and issues and where do we need to look to begin to help solve an issue here or there. In those circumstances where you need some political guidance, if you will, about how to proceed with a problem or an issue. But I would tell you, at the end of the day, in terms of making sure that operationally things are being accomplished, I know full well that someone in a position as a city administrator, they have to communicate with all of you, because ultimately they're responsible to all of you. Period. It goes with the territory of doing this job as a city manager or city administrator. We all know that. We get into this business. If we stay in this business, we know that. It's part of the territory. You learn how to communicate, and you realize that communicating with the individuals who are on your board is an important piece of what you have to do.
So then the mayor wouldn't be giving would essentially be giving that person some guidance too?
Yes.
And they would be commiserating between themselves to try to carry out certain tasks? I mean,
Commiserating.
well, I mean, well, you know what, just,
Well, I think ultimately what they can do is to some extent they can help each other. Because there are different responsibilities here. We're talking about a set of things, a set of responsibilities, things that need to be done over here by the mayor that are outward looking in terms of the day-to-day or organizationally, community. They're more outward looking. Where the things that you're asking a city administrator to do are all the things that are internal looking. If that makes sense.
yeah, that makes perfect sense.
That's a good explanation.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and that's the picture that I have. I just still can't see this person reporting to 13 people. It just blows my mind.
It's what I do.
Well,
Well-
not your day-to-day operations, though. I mean,
Here's the thing. Do you remember the code of ethics?
uh-huh,
There's one of those ethics, one of those things in there. We talk about this very thing. We know it's hard. That's why it's a part of our ethics.
so do they give us like a report every quarter or every
Well-
year, or?
Well, I suspect it'd be about at least, well, it can be as frequent as you want it to be. But I would tell you, most of the individuals that I know, at a very minimum, they'd communicate with you at each board meeting.
Oh, okay, all right.
Minimum. Now, does that change? Oh, you bet it does. Depending on this issue and the severity and the magnitude of what's going on. That can change in a heartbeat,
Okay,
and does.
I think I have a clearer picture. Thanks,
Okay.
Gary.
Alderman Ames.
I was going to ask a question about the reporting relationship as well. I think she covered it pretty well, but I will point out, in the private sector, it's not unusual to have a CEO report to Board of Directors. I did it for a number of years, very large company, and day in, day out, I would talk, if I had to talk to anybody, I'd talk to the chairman of the board, who theoretically represented the other board members. However, if the other board members decided they didn't like the direction he was pointing me, the same, votes could change the whole thing. So it's not a terribly unusual way to run an organization. It is somewhat uncomfortable sometimes, but if everything's going well, piece of cake.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Board of
Alderman
Directors.
Skidmore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of points or an offer of different view in terms of what we've heard tonight. I appreciate you coming out, and you've always been a good friend to us at the board, and on a personal level, you've been a good friend to me, and I've always appreciated your frankness and your honesty to us, because it's very refreshing in the world that we live in. Dealing with governmental entities is not so much like that. One thing that I think that we need, as a board, need to recognize is something that we've always struggled with, and that is the fact that the city administrator, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is my question to you, that is, they would be strictly in charge of the day-to-day operation of the municipality that he or she is being the administrator, whereas this board should not even get involved in those kind of problems. And I know we've struggled with that for many, many years sometimes up here. But I think that's one thing I think the board we need to remember is, that's not going to change. This board doesn't have any, we should not get involved like that in the day-to-day operation. That would be what the mayor is relinquishing, or this board and the mayor is relinquishing to the city administrator. Is that policy or from the mayor? And the city administrator still would report to this board if there was a problem that needed to be resolved. Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly accurate.
Okay.
And I would, to take it a little further, an administrator should be viewed to some extent as a conduit, if you will, between you all as elected officials and when you have an issue or a problem that's come up, as a conduit between things that you're dealing with or people have come to you, and making sure that things happen on a department level. And in that case, and we know this, in our business, we know this to be true, that, and we can set up the mechanisms, they're easy to do. Once something gets done, you circle back around and let the city administrator is responsible for letting you all know the outcome and resolution of problems in a timely manner.
Thank you, Mayor. That's it for me.
Any other questions? All right, let me spend just a minute reminding you how we got here. Back to Alderman Woodcock's original question, budget session number 1. What are we going to do about Don Long's unfilled position? Don was Economic Community Development Director, mayoral assistant. His concentration was not necessarily on going out and making the deals. His concentration is, once we've got, let's say, Outback Steakhouse landed, carrying it through our process here at the city level, carrying it through planning, carrying it through codes, carrying it through the fire marshal. That's part of the city administrator's duty. That would be something that the city administrator would do. I'm asking for a little additional help above what Don Long did. I'm asking for that business acumen, that business help to settle not only planning, public works, fire marshal codes, but to handle human resources, personnel, and finance, which Don had nothing to do with. And so rather than creating an additional position, our very frank discussion was, I would like for us to look at a city administrator. I think by now, this is the 3rd session we've had on this, that's allowed under our charter. It's absolutely no change to our form of government. It's a change to the way we manage our government. But I can tell you tonight that all 4 candidates for mayor are in this room. And if any of them don't think they need help on the legal, human resources, finance side, they haven't quite got the grasp of the width of this job. And I'm not saying that, about that. I'm just sort of an open comment to the future mayors. This is something that you need. In the world of a $44 million corporation with 400 employees, in the world of Obamacare with health insurance rates going up 27.8%, you could spend the next 3 weeks studying that as mayor. Now, making that work with what's happening with post-employment benefits for our retirees, making that work with, you guys have been through the budget process, making that work with how many millions of dollars we need to spend on paving. Are we going to increase our park load? That's the type of thing that you can have this city administrator bring you hard numbers on. And we don't necessarily have to get in a boondoggle argument about every little thing. But that's something that sits on this side. It's still a full-time job for the mayor. There's still the alphabet soup, Regional Transportation Authority, Metropolitan Planning Organization, Greater National Regional Council, Tennessee Department of Transportation. All those are acronyms. RTA, MPO, GNRC, TDOT. That's where our funding comes from. If the mayor is tied up in this building dealing with Obamacare, we're not getting any additional funding for roads because we're not out working that MPO RTA side. The mayor, I want the future mayors to know, this doesn't diminish the job as mayor. It allows you to do the things that the mayor needs to do. And the mayor is still the political side of the thing. The city administrator is not the political side. You know, he's not political. You can tell from the tone in Gary's voice. He's not political, right? So,
I take that as a compliment.
yes. I mean, that's how we got here. I don't want this to be some dreamed up scheme that we got. It's not a scheme. These guys need help. If you look at the mayor of Franklin, he's got a city administrator and 2 assistant city administrators. I mean, the job of running the day-to-day business is big, and it's getting bigger, and it's getting more litigious. That's why we've got an attorney running for mayor. The job description is wide and deep, and all 4 of these guys and this guy need that help. Okay. Anybody got anything else for Alderman Brown?
You created another question.
Uh-oh.
If and when, if, there's 2 ifs and a when there, that we would decide to do this. This job description from the city of Franklin is just an example,
Yes.
a guideline. We could tweak that, throw that away, start over, add to it, take from it, but to make it clear, the city administrator reports to this board, the department heads report to the city administrator. Yeah.
As a chief operating officer, yes.
So the department heads don't report to the mayor anymore?
The chief operating officer,
Where did you miss that?
you act as the conduit for the day-to-day operational stuff.
But still hires and fires at the will of this board.
The mayor.
Hires and fires at the will of this board, which is not changing. It's the way it is today.
Who's that, Mayor? I'm sorry.
That's not changing. That's
Who hires and fires?
the mayor hires and fires the department heads at the will of this board. 7 votes of this board, right?
But again, however this instrument here would be put together is through your help with input from
Yes.
12, 13 people.
Let's talk about what we did with the police chief. A series of police chiefs that ran almost 35 years, 40 years, right? Gary came in, we hired him, he went out and talked to all the different constituents, internally, externally, helped us develop a job description. We went out and a nationwide search, had 80 resumes. Gary shortlisted it down to 10, and then I think we got down to 3, because we also included, when we hired Chief Miller, we included the city manager of Goodlettsville, we included, who else do we have on that team? It doesn't matter.
Two police chiefs and an HR director.
So they built a group. That group cut it down to 3, and then I eventually made a recommendation to hire Mickey, and y'all accepted that recommendation. Gary and his crew are very, very good at that. That's MTAS. At the county level, CTAS right now is hired for our consolidated dispatch center. They're cutting those resumes down to give to executive group to get it down to a recommendation to their full board. So he's in that business. He's very good at that. And just, I'm proud of Mickey. Mickey, I think, only had 2 pieces of pizza tonight. 3. 3.
You didn't see it all.
But you have to admit that the process we went through with Gary brought us a winner at that level. Okay? Alderman Stamper, you got closing?
I was just going to ask Gary, I thought of one more question too. Do you regularly work with city administrators and managers that come to you with, for advice, for help in matters such as selection process of department heads, things like that?
Oh, yes. All the time.
All right, guys. An hour and 26 minutes.
Motion adjourned.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.